St. Louis. A chilly Thursday afternoon. The suburb of Crestwood kept its familiar rhythm: neatly trimmed lawns, quiet two-story houses with white picket fences, and the steady hum of cars rolling slowly down paved streets. At the end of one such street, in a red brick house, lived a man few knew. His name was Marcus Reed, and he was 40 years old and a remote IT specialist. Every morning, he rose early, brewed a cup of black coffee, opened his laptop in the living room, and buried himself in lines of code. By late afternoon, he would mow the lawn, mend the fence, or wash his car. Neighbors rarely saw him at block barbecues or local get-togethers. Not because he was unfriendly, but because Marcus valued quiet, preferring solitude over noise. Marcus was almost invisible to those living nearby, polite enough, offering short replies when greeted, then slipping back into his home. Some thought him cold. Others whispered, "Is he hiding something?" But no one had proof, only speculation sparked by the silence of a man who shared so little of himself. After a long morning of online meetings, Marcus stepped onto his porch and drew in cold air that day. He had only meant to check his internet speed, but something unusual caught his attention. His Wi-Fi connection was abnormally slow. Video calls froze, music streams stalled, and his professional instincts told him something wasn't right. Marcus spotted a strange device on the network list when he opened the router app on his phone. The name read St. Louis_01. It wasn't his laptop. It wasn't his TV. It wasn't his phone. The label was too deliberate to be random. Marcus frowned. He lived alone. He had never shared his password. So who was using his Wi-Fi? Calm but irritated, Marcus decided to reset the password immediately. He walked out to the driveway for a stronger signal, tapping in a new string of characters. He didn't realize that this ordinary action, standing outside, eyes locked on his screen, fingers moving quickly, was being closely watched from across the fence. By Karen Whitfield, the suspicious neighbor. This was the spark that lit the storm. A man who only wanted to be left alone, suddenly placed across the street, behind the kitchen window. Karen Whitfield was rinsing dishes when she saw something familiar and strange. Marcus Reed, the quiet neighbor, standing motionless in his driveway. But he wasn't gazing at the sky or checking his car. He was fixated on his phone, fingers moving quickly, his face drawn tight with concentration. Inside Karen, suspicion had long been simmering. Marcus skipped neighborhood picnics for years, never showed up at community festivals, and never mingled with anyone. He kept his distance, cold and detached. And for Karen, that could only mean one thing. He had something to hide. Today, watching Marcus's head bowed, face shadowed, fingers flying over the screen, Karen's imagination ignited. Scenes flashed in her mind. Perhaps he was hacking some system, or worse, spying on someone in the neighborhood. She forced herself to keep watching. Each passing second only inflated her suspicion. Could his reclusive lifestyle be just a cover for something darker? A whisper in her mind insisted, "Something's wrong. Normal people don't stand frozen for minutes just staring at a phone." Karen slammed the plate into the sink, wiped her hands on her apron, and grabbed her phone. Her fingers trembled, but her resolve was firm. She dialed 911. "Emergency dispatch, what's your situation?" Karen's voice came out hurried, almost breathless. "I want to report suspicious activity. My neighbor. He's standing in his driveway, glued to his phone, tapping constantly. It looks very unusual. I don't know what he's doing, but something is definitely wrong. Please send the police to check." The dispatcher pressed gently. "Does he have any weapons? Has he threatened anyone?" Karen bit her lip, uncertain. She had no evidence, but her vague conviction had already overpowered her reason. I'm not sure, but my instincts tell me it's dangerous. He's not normal. You need to come right away. The call ended. Karen peered through the glass once more. Marcus was still there, hunched over his phone, unaware that sirens would be screaming down the street in just a few minutes, and flashing red and blue lights would paint his quiet porch. Marcus thought he was simply protecting his privacy. Marcus Reed had just finished changing his Wi-Fi password when a long wail of sirens rose in the distance. He looked up, frowning slightly. In quiet Crestwood, police presence was rare. He told himself they were probably passing through, until he saw the patrol car turn directly onto his street and stop right in front of his house. Marcus's stomach dipped. He stood still, phone in hand, as two officers stepped out. One was tall and broad-shouldered with a stern face, Detective Ryan Navarro. The other, shorter and quicker, her eyes razor-sharp, Officer Belle Carter. Navarro advanced, one hand hovering near his belt, not drawing a weapon, but making the warning clear. His voice rang out firmly. "Sir, we received a report of suspicious activity here. Can you explain what you're doing?" Marcus froze. Suspicious activity? He was standing in his own driveway. He glanced at his car in the garage, at the mailbox with Reed clearly printed, then back at the two officers. "I'm just changing my Wi-Fi password. Someone unknown connected to my network. I'm trying to kick them off," he answered, calm but edged with doubt. Navarro shot a quick look at Carter, then back at Marcus, expression unreadable. "Do you live here?" Marcus nearly laughed. The question was so absurd that he crossed his arms over his chest. "I've lived here 3 years. My name's on the door, my car's in the driveway. What more proof do you need?" Before the exchange could continue, a sharp voice sliced across the street. "He's lying!" Marcus turned. As expected, Karen Whitfield, the neighbor who'd called 911, stood on her porch, arms folded tight, eyes hard. "I've been watching. He's always out there staring at his phone, looking around like he's tracking people. Today too, 10 minutes straight." Marcus felt heat rise to his temples. He kept his voice level. "I'm not tracking anyone. I'm in my router settings because an unknown device is stealing my Wi-Fi." Karen let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, sure, and I'm supposed to believe that?" Navarro raised a hand to keep them apart, but there was already a flicker of caution in his eyes. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am," looked up, voice dropping. "This device, is it yours?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I have no idea what that is. That's exactly why I changed the password." Carter, silent until now, spoke up, her gaze cutting. "If what you're saying is true, this isn't just someone stealing Wi-Fi. Someone's deliberately embedding into your network." Karen, from her porch, suddenly lost her certainty. She stammered, "Wait, you mean someone's actually spying on us?" Marcus turned to her, his eyes cold. "Exactly. And while you were busy calling the police on me, that person could be watching you too." Silence dropped over the street. The wind through the trees sounded unnervingly loud. Karen clutched her railing, trembling. Navarro straightened, his face hardening. "Everyone inside. We need to see exactly what we're dealing with." And just like that, a peaceful afternoon became the starting point of a sprawling surveillance case no one saw coming. The door to Marcus's house clicked shut, leaving Karen Whitfield frozen on the porch. No matter how hard she tried to compose herself, her fingers trembled against the railing. The swaggering certainty she'd worn only minutes earlier had curdled into a low, crawling unease. Inside, Detective Navarro and Officer Carter followed Marcus into the living room. His laptop was still open on the small dining table, its glow casting a tense light across his face. Marcus sat down, drew a long breath, and typed commands to pull up the network log. The device list came into sharp focus. Aside from Marcus's phone, laptop, and TV, one name glared back at them, the same one from before. Crestwood IO1. Status, active, online, bandwidth, constant. Navarro leaned in, his eyes narrowing. How long has this device been connected? Marcus scrolled down through the logs, lines cascading like a waterfall. Not an hour, not a day. It's been latched on for weeks. Carter furrowed her brow, stepping closer. Can you see what it's accessing? Marcus typed faster, sweat beading at his temples. Within seconds, the screen filled with access paths, /feeds /cam /entry, /feeds /cam /living room. He froze. His voice rasped. Oh God. Navarro's posture snapped tight. Tell me, what are they looking at? Marcus swiveled the laptop toward them. Cameras. They're using my own security system to watch live. The living room went heavy with silence. Carter bit her lip, eyes hardening. That means it's not just stealing bandwidth. They've taken control. This is unlawful surveillance. Marcus pulled more logs. Each new line felt like a blade of ice. Different IPs, bedroom, kitchen, back porch. But then something worse surfaced. These addresses didn't point only to his devices. Some belonged to other networks. Wait, Marcus muttered. This isn't just my house. This is multiple homes in the neighborhood. Navarro's voice was low, clipped. You're sure? Marcus clicked open another feed. A frame appeared. A strange living room, a green sofa, a painting on the wall that wasn't his. Another feed covering her face, trembling. For the first time, she understood the horror. The threat wasn't the quiet man across the street, someone invisible hiding inside the community she'd believed was safe. Navarro instantly grabbed his radio, voice crisp and commanding. This is Navarro. We need immediate support from cybercrime. Signs of a large-scale network intrusion. Residential security cameras compromised. Mark as priority. Carter clenched her fists, eyes flashing with resolve. If we don't stop this now, no one in this neighborhood will be safe. Marcus typed a few more commands. Data was poured in, tangled links and hijacked IPs. And then a destination surfaced. The address where all the data was being sent. Not some anonymous overseas server. A house right inside Crestwood. He swallowed hard, eyes widening. We don't have to look far. The person's right here in this neighborhood. The room thickened with silence. Karen lifted her pale face. In that instant, everyone understood. The danger wasn't hypothetical. It was real. And it was right next door. Marcus sat before his laptop, data streams pouring across the screen like relentless rivers. Each character, each IP address was a breadcrumb leading back to the wolf hiding among the sheep. Navarro and Carter stood close behind, their eyes fixed on the monitor while Karen collapsed into a chair, her cold hands gripping each other tightly. Marcus muttered under his breath. If this is a spy network, he can't hide forever. Everything leaves a footprint. He enlarged the logs, filtering by frequency of connection. One IP stood out, not even masked with elaborate tricks. Instead of routing through out-of-state servers or international VPNs, the signal came from somewhere very close. Too close. His voice dropped, hoarse and deliberate. The data is being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood, less than 200 meters away. Carter raised an eyebrow. You sure? It could be a spoofed address. Marcus shook his head, fingers striking firmly on the touchpad. No. This is a continuous connection, never dropping. Only a nearby device could stay this stable. This is the source. Navarro moved around to face him, arms crossed, his tone a low command. Then we need a name. A specific address. Marcus clenched his jaw, opened a new tab and cross-referenced signal strength with the neighborhood Wi-Fi map. A graph lit up, each glowing dot marking a home, and then the strongest beam pointed directly at house number 114, Whitfield residence. Karen shot to her feet, her voice breaking. No, that's impossible. That's my house. Marcus fixed his steel-cold gaze on her. Then explain, Mrs. Whitfield, how all the data traces back there. Karen faltered, stumbling backwards, words spilling out. I don't know anything about this. It's not me, I swear to God. Navarro slowly turned toward her, his eyes probing. Who else lives with you, Mrs. Whitfield? Karen hesitated, voice trembling. Just me and my nephew, Brandon. He's 22, studying information. Prepare a search warrant. Target, house number 114, Crestwood. Suspect likely inside. Carter gave a sharp nod, her hand brushing near her holster. If he's skilled enough to build an entire surveillance network, he won't go quietly. Marcus stared out the window, the street lamp casting a hard glow across his determined face. He whispered almost to himself. It's time for him to be unmasked. The room thickened into silence, tension so sharp it seemed to echo with the clock's ticking. Everyone knew the confrontation was near, and the truth, however brutal, was about to be exposed. House number 114 sat between two rows of trees, a faint yellow glow spilling weakly from the downstairs window. Karen staggered up the path first, her trembling hands gripping the doorframe as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Behind her, Navarro and Carter exchanged a firm glance. Their suspicion had hardened into near certainty. Marcus kept his distance, but his eyes never left the doorway. This house had brought him endless trouble, and now it was the place that held the answers. Karen drew a deep breath and unlocked the door. The latch clicked with a dry snap. A cold draft mixed with the sterile smell of electronics drifted out from inside. The living room was unnervingly neat, sofa cushions perfectly aligned, the coffee table bare, the TV dark, a space treated not as a home, but as a shelter. Brandon, come downstairs. There are some people here who want to talk to you, Karen called, her voice trembling. No answer. Navarro placed a hand on her shoulder, signaling her to stay quiet. He tilted his head, listening. From upstairs came the faint scrape of the chair moving, the furious clatter of keys, and then silence. Carter drew her gun, her eyes like steel. He knows we're here. The wooden stairs creaked under the officers' steps as they climbed. Karen clung to the banister, her breathing out of control. Marcus stayed below, taut as a bowstring but unwilling to leave. He needed to see this with his own eyes. At the top of the hall, Brandon's door was shut tight, a pale blue light seeping from the crack. Computer screens. Navarro knocked hard 3 times. Brandon Foster, police! Open the door! Silence. Only the low hum of a fan. Carter counted softly. 1, 2, then turned the knob sharply. It wasn't locked. The door swung open to reveal a darkened room lit only by the ghostly glow of 3 computer monitors. On-screen windows showed hallways, living rooms, even bedrooms. Not just Marcus's house, but multiple families. One feed displayed Karen's own living room. Undeniable evidence. Brandon sat hunched at the desk, thin with dark circles under his voice low and resonant like a drumbeat. A game. You call peeking into people's bedrooms a game? You turned your neighbors into characters in your sick hobby. Brandon stared down at his lap, silent. Karen crumpled, tears streaking down her cheeks. God, my own blood, doing this. Navarro didn't hesitate. He strode forward, snapping the cuffs on Brandon's wrists, his voice like steel. Brandon Foster, you're under arrest for unlawful system intrusion and illegal surveillance. You have the right to remain silent. The metallic click of the handcuffs rang like a complete stop. Carter swiftly shut down the computers, pulling the hard drives and sealing them into evidence bags. Brandon offered. He had no resistance, his face drained of life. The glowing monitors blinked off, leaving only Karen on the floor choking on sobs. Marcus turned away without a trace of triumph. All he felt was bitterness. All the time he'd been doubted and scrutinized, the real predator had been right in front of them, and no one had looked in the right direction. As Navarro led Brandon out, he glanced at Marcus, his tone weighted. You were right. Without you, this neighborhood would never have known how deeply it was being watched. Marcus gave a slight nod, saying nothing. He only briefly looked at Karen, her eyes drowning in regret. Her voice cracked like dry wood. I called the police on the wrong man. Right at his own door. And the monster was living under mine. No one contradicted her. The truth was exposed, naked and merciless. The house's front door swung open, and the Crestwood night wind rushed in with a biting chill. Brandon was escorted down the steps, his wrists bound in handcuffs that gleamed under the patrol car's flashing lights. The once quiet street now brimmed with neighbors peering out from behind curtains. A few bolder ones stepped onto their lawns. They whispered and pointed, their faces a mix of fear and outrage. Navarro pressed Brandon onto the brick steps while Carter carefully pulled out her notepad. This was no longer a matter of private explanation. It had become a public confession. Brandon Foster, do you have anything to say? Navarro's voice cut sharply and finally. Brandon kept his head bowed, hair falling across his forehead. For a long moment, he said nothing. The crackle of the police radio, the neighbors' murmurs, and Karen's ragged breathing behind him blended into a suffocating soundtrack. Finally, Brandon raised his head. His eyes, rimmed dark with exhaustion, glimmered with something between defiance and despair. Fine. I'll speak, so everyone understands. Carter leaned in, pen poised. Brandon swallowed hard, then began, his tone flat. At first, I just wanted to try. At school, no one respected me. I was just the computer nerd. I wanted to prove I could do something others couldn't. When I saw dozens of devices connecting without anyone noticing, I realized I had power. He let out a crooked laugh, lips twisting. The power to look into people at their weakest, their homes, their families. I knew when they ate dinner, when they turned off their lights, even when they fought. A ripple of horror ran through the crowd. A young woman clapped her hand over her mouth, gasping, "Oh my God, he was watching my house?" Brandon's eyes flicked toward her, then turned to Marcus, as if releasing everything he'd held in. And yes, I watched you, Marcus. I knew you went to bed at 11. I knew you played jazz while you worked. I saw you on your video calls with family. Sobbing, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." I swear I didn't know. No one answered her, only their eyes, accusing, pitying, disappointed, fixed on Brandon and Karen. Carter closed her notepad, her gaze icy. You've confessed. Remember this. Every family you spied on, every camera you hijacked is a separate crime. You will face all of it. Brandon lowered his head, no longer resisting. He looked small, drained, as though consumed by the very addiction to power he had created. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly in the heavy air. I'm not the only victim. This entire neighborhood is. But the worst part is how quickly the innocent were condemned. He glanced at Karen, his eyes both cold and sorrowful. You called the police on me, while the real danger was sitting one door away from you. Karen sobbed harder, unable to lift her head. Navarro gripped Brandon's shoulder, pulling him to his feet. That's enough. He'll answer to the law. And as for the rest of you, he swept his eyes across the frozen crowd. Remember this. Blind suspicion can turn us against the good while letting the real evil hide in plain sight. The wail of the police siren split the night again, shattering the suffocating silence. Brandon was led away, leaving behind a neighborhood that would never be as peaceful as before. As the patrol car carrying Brandon pulled away, the flashing blue and red lights washed over the facades of Crestwood's quiet homes. Neighbors still lingered along the street, scattered and silent. No one spoke immediately. They looked at one another, then at Karen, who collapsed on the steps, trembling and hollow, as though she had lost everything. A heavy atmosphere hung over the block, a suffocating silence no one dared to break first. Everyone knew the absolute horror exposed tonight wasn't only Brandon's crime, but a truth harder to swallow. They had once rallied behind suspicion instead of reason. Marcus stood apart, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes sweeping over the familiar faces, neighbors who had once smiled politely when passing him, but had also just watched him branded as suspicious for no reason other than his solitude. He wasn't angry, but his gaze carried a quiet disappointment, making several people drop their eyes. It was Mr. Harris, a middle-aged man who finally stepped forward. His voice rasped. Marcus, I'm sorry. When I heard Melanie call the police, I assumed there had to be something to it. I never imagined. Marcus gave a slight nod, though his eyes stayed fixed on him. We all make mistakes when we let fear take the lead. But the real danger is when we don't stop to ask, where's the proof? The words froze the group in place. A woman clutching her child gave a slight nod as if she was only now realizing the weight of rash judgment. Karen remained motionless. She sobbed, lifting her eyes to Marcus with a look of both regret and despair. I called the police on you, while the one who truly needed investigating was in my own house. I can't forgive myself. Marcus inhaled deeply, his voice steady, not cruel, but resolute. I don't need your forgiveness. What I hope is that you learn from this. Not from me, but to protect yourself and this community. The words landed like a blow straight to the heart. Karen broke down in fresh sobs, while the Wi-Fi passwords, while others stared warily at their security cameras as if betrayed. And above all, they thought about the man they had misjudged and the bitter cost of getting it wrong. The next morning, Crestwood awoke to an atmosphere unlike any before. The neighborhood group chat buzzed non-stop. Everyone was talking about the truth that had come to light, about Brandon Foster, the young man once seen quietly hunched over his laptop, revealed as the one who had turned Wi-Fi into a trap, worming his way into every house, every camera, every private moment on the block. But the name mentioned most wasn't Brandon. It was Marcus Coleman, the man once branded suspicious, who had been doubted, misjudged, and yet had been the one to unlock the mystery and save the community from a nightmare of surveillance. In front of the neighborhood community center, dozens of families gathered that afternoon. No one had planned the meeting, yet somehow everyone knew they needed an explanation, a closing of the wound. Karen stood in the corner, face drawn, eyes heavy with regret. When Marcus walked in, the room seemed to shift. He wore nothing remarkable, just a blue shirt and plain jeans, but his presence silenced the hall. An older neighbor spoke first. "Marcus, we owe you an apology. All of us in this neighborhood stayed silent when we should have stood with you. Worse, we doubted you." Marcus stopped, his eyes sweeping slowly across their faces. He didn't answer right away. The entire hall held its breath as if awaiting judgment. Finally he spoke, his voice low, yet resonant. "I don't need to hear apologies. What I want to know is this. Have you actually learned anything from what happened?" He paused, letting the question settle into the air. "Last night I was labeled suspicious. Why? Because I keep to myself? Because I don't attend block parties? Because I'm quiet? Is that enough reason to think I'm hiding something?" Several people lowered their eyes. Karen broke down, shoulders shaking. Marcus continued, his gaze fixed on the crowd. "The truth is, when we let suspicion and prejudice guide us, we turn the blade against the innocent, while the real danger walks free. You've seen it yourselves. The one who violated everyone's privacy lived right here, in a house you all trusted. We didn't miss it because it was far away. We missed it because we..." Trembling through her tears. "Karen, you were wrong. But you weren't alone. We are all wrong sometimes. This community, this society. What matters is the courage to change." From the back of the hall, applause began. It spread, louder and louder, not applause for victory but for awakening. Marcus bowed his head slightly, then spoke his final words. "Assumptions have consequences. Groundless suspicion can destroy an innocent life, while the real criminal walks free. From this day forward, remember, justice begins with truth, not with fear." He turned and walked out, leaving behind a hall heavy with silence and reflection. And this is the truth, a truth that reminds us all, never rush to judgment before you know the whole story, because one wrong glance, one baseless assumption, can wound the most innocent among us. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe, and share this video to spread the message. Because somewhere out there, someone may need this reminder. Justice begins with truth, not with fear.